Hi everyone, it's Four Women, Four Decades here, part two of the Letting Ourselves Go. As you may or may not be aware, Bea and I weren't able to make the previous call, which the wonderful Natalie and Rachel did so beautifully. And Bea and I had some things that we wanted to share, but felt that actually to get the four of us together again would be the best way to go about it. So here we are, and we hope you enjoy this conversation between the four of us. So I don't know who wants to start.
I'm happy to
Okay.
share some initial thoughts. One of the things that when I was thinking about this topic was when we were, like the four of us, talking about what letting ourselves go actually means, and all of these words coming up. And what I suddenly thought was, so if this kind of letting ourselves go is this kind of destination or this aspiration over here, then what's going on here right now? Like, what does the opposite, if we're not letting ourselves go already, then what are we doing? What is the opposite of letting ourselves go? And it was really interesting when I was thinking about this, because the words that came up were holding ourselves together. So if I'm not letting myself go, then I'm holding myself together. And kind of doing the same exercise and thinking, okay, well, what words come up for me when I think about that? And it's a kind of, it's tiring. It feels tense. It's a kind of a closing off. It's not this expansive, freeing kind of sensation that I now think of when I think of letting myself go. Some of the other words that I wrote down were effortful, tiring, tape and glue, tense, precarious, misaligned, and yet from an outsider's perspective, socially acceptable or strong. That actually, that's maybe how it's perceived. It's like, oh, she's got it all together, she's holding it all together, and that's maybe perceived as a good thing. But I'm not really convinced it is, because with all that tension and that stress and that pain and that heaviness of trying to hold it all together, like, good things don't come from that, surely. So I just thought it was quite an interesting thing if we're flipping the idea of letting ourselves go on its head, just thinking about, okay, well, where are we now? What does this look like? Is this actually worth sticking out for? It's like we're so fearful of change and going over there, daring to let ourselves go, because we feel like familiar is good. But actually, maybe if we start to really look at what's going on for us right now, and whether that is in alignment with how we actually want to be and how we want to show up, then maybe actually it will be easier for us to make that transition, because actually staying put where we are right now is just going to seem so much less attractive.
Yeah. What comes to mind from that, and it's funny because I'd written this down without knowing that you were going to say that, is one of my favorite quotes that I used at the right at the start of Best Nick as Always, my first book. And it's from Anais Nin, and she says, and the time came when the risk to remain tight in the bud was more painful than the risk it took to blossom. And that's exactly what you seem to be saying there, is that, and I always think of a peony because, and it's one of my favorite flowers, but a peony in a bud is rock hard, absolutely rock hard. And yet when it opens up, it's this big, blousy, papery, huge flower. And you just think it was constricted and it needed to be there. But actually it's in the blossoming, isn't it? That the beauty is. And when you talk about be, all those words about be, you know, where we are now, in that it's constricted, and it makes me want to, it feels tight and tense, doesn't it?
Mm.
And I love that you said it's like making this, as she says in the quote, it's more painful to stay like this than it is to let ourselves go, which is to blossom.
And I think we maybe don't realize that it is this painful, or we've got used to that pain and discomfort, right?
I think we've just got used to that being normal, that what we're seeing around us, this, or, you know, the norms of society that we keep up with, and we're holding it together. You know, and when you were talking, I was also thinking about when people, it's like a prize to be saying, oh, she's got it all under control. Like, actually, you know, yes, we've always kind of almost said, well, that's a good thing to have it under control. And there's like this new questioning that's arising for me, well, whether that is good, because for some reason that's not feeling real now. That's not feeling authentic. That's this constricted sort of version. It's like in the part one when Rachel and I were chatting, what came to mind for me was this kind of tight fist versus open palm. It's the same as the bud and the bloom, or this, the spaciousness versus what's restricted. But I think you're right. Do we even know? Because that's what we're all so used to doing. I used to walk around with so much stress, and I just thought that was normal. I thought that's part of life, and that's what I just didn't even recognize. I had such a high tolerance for it, and I now see that it can be so different. So I'm loving playing with this idea about dropping some of the things that just don't make sense anymore.
And talking about that tolerance for that kind of level of constriction, it's like, you know, in the meditation course that we're all doing at the moment, when they start off and it's like, you know, connect with your breath, and or with like a body scan, how do you notice that you actually drop your shoulders? Because you don't actually know that they're up there. It's only when somebody says, or breathe deeply, you think, oh God, I'm breathing up here. I'm not actually filling my lungs. So it's all shallow, all constricted.
But it's also, I think, for a lot of people, and me included, and I think we've talked about this before, but it's known. So it's like an unconscious addiction to control, right? Because if you're asking me to do this and I've not done that before, I know where I am when I'm restricted. I know where I am when I have to hold it together. I know where I am. So I wonder if it's just we've not really questioned that, letting go of what's expected, and actually questioning, well, who's expecting it of me, and at what point did I sign up? And how, you know, out of the ordinary is it going to be for people if I just, you know, deregister? It's like, I'm not going to come out of, you know, societal norms, but I'm just going to question to what levels am I holding myself up, and who created those standards for me. But I think that when you start to look at it, you realize maybe it's not necessarily always pain, but it's just, I just understood what I had to do to live over in that place, and now to come over here and open and be a bit more relaxed almost, or just have less control. It's unknown, so it's uncomfortable, and we spend a lot of time just exploring how being uncomfortable is okay.
Yeah, I think it's also a question of, like, at what cost. Like, even it's just mad to think that we're willing to keep ourselves in a state that we know is uncomfortable and painful and harmful, because we know the rules of the game and we know the parameters. Whereas I'm pretty sure kind of deep down, we all know the benefits of, like you say, kind of unsubscribing from that.
Yeah.
And kind of it almost feels like coming up for air. That I think we all deep down on some level know that is beneficial, and that is what our body and our soul so desperately needs. But it's this idea of the unknown that for some reason just keeps us in that box. Like what are we so afraid of? Is it that idea of not having control? Like, control is just an illusion anyway. Like what is that fear that just keeps us stuck, and that is causing us to continue harming ourselves knowingly? Like what I don't know.
Is this part of the people pleasing thing, that we're frightened to make changes because we fear the impact it'll have on other people? I don't know.
Sure, that's a massive part of it. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that's a massive part of it. And I think a huge part of it is like you just don't know until you spot it. Like, I didn't know that I was walking around with unnecessary stress, because I just thought that was me, that was, you know, life. I didn't know that I didn't have to be a perfectionist about everything, because I thought that was part of me. Like, and so I didn't know until I knew it. And then when I saw a little bit differently about it, and it ceased to make sense, some of the things I used to do that were so tight, then I saw the truth in it. But until that point, I genuinely didn't. And I think, you know, part of it is that, and that's why we kind of say just it's worth just challenging some of the things that it's just like autopilot. We're on autopilot. We live on autopilot so much. And just actually, if we just challenge some of the things, does this feel right? I know I've done this for the last 10 years, but, you know, actually, does this now make sense for me? Because sometimes it will, and sometimes it won't. And that's where the freedom is, when you discover, you know.
And I wonder whether what comes to mind, and I know we've spoken about this before, but it's like living life on that travelator at the airport, isn't it? It's just going, we just stand there and it takes us. But I wonder, it's around blind spots as well, isn't it? As you said, Natalie, you don't know until you know it. And I think maybe it's looking out for a discomfort that we feel and question that. Just what is it, or a kind of a waking up and then looking in that direction. Because then, as you say, it's like we can then begin to ask those questions. You know, one of the questions B and I love to ask in the work we do with those with eating disorders is, what do I know to be true? Because we just go off on these stories, well, that's just the way it is, or blah, 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 I've done it like this forever, etc., etc. But actually, when we stop for a moment and just say, what do I know to be true? Actually, that strips it right back.
I love the kind of on the topic of pain, like what you were saying, Natalie and Rach, in part one about the shoes. And it's like, and it's like what we say in all our talks and in our coaching and in everything, that our feelings are a really good guide as to the state of mind that we're in, and the quality of thinking that's going on. And actually, maybe it's also a good indicator of when we're outgrowing the stories and social norms that we've subscribed to for so long, that it's like the chrysalis moment that the butterfly knows when to come out, when to break out of that, of its kind of safe place. And actually, I think our body tells us when we're ready to leave that stuff behind, but yet we ignore it so much, and the pain builds up and up and up, and we're just like, give me more pain medication to numb this pain, rather than listening to what that pain is telling us and then acting on it, even though there's this potential unknown. But it's like, why don't we flip that on its head as well? Why does unknown have to be a bad thing?
What's coming up for me as I'm listening to this is this idea of, like, we talk about the comfort zone, don't we? And that's just what we're used to. And you know, I guess there's another word for some of our autopilots, because it's how we feel comfortable, and it's our habits and our patterns, and much of it is our conditioning. And what I'm seeing kind of fresh almost is that, well, we call it the comfort zone, but in this conversation, what we're talking about of moving to something that feels more authentic and freeing, and dropping some of the narratives that no longer suit us, you know, actually what feels comfortable and aligned is that real, what is real, what feels like it fits our true self. Like, if you were really to talk about comfort, it's sitting in that camp, not in the false, it's just what I'm used to. This is like kind of an interesting flip on that comfort word, I guess.
Gosh, that's so true. And what also comes to mind is the times that when I've made kind of big decisions in my life, one of them to end my marriage, one of them to move back from London back to Wales, and people have said things like, because those things felt totally aligned, because I couldn't stay any longer. And what people said was things like, I could never do what you've done. I'm not brave enough. I don't have the courage to do that. How did you manage to do that? And it's so interesting, isn't it? Because it was, for me, it was breaking out of, my comfort zone was really uncomfortable. It wasn't, I had to leave. And I didn't know what was on the flip side. I had no idea. Absolutely no idea. Single mum with, you know, raising children. I wasn't working full time. I had no idea what was on the other side, but I knew I couldn't afford to. That's it. Somebody said, how can you afford to leave? And my response was, how can I afford to stay? And we were talking about two different things, obviously, financial and emotional. But so true. And the coming to Wales, you know, but what about all your friends, and what about your connections? Or what I said, well, I don't know, but what I know is that I want to be by the sea.
I wonder if, you know, Natalie's saying we don't know until we know, and then, you know, B's saying deep down we might know. If we listen, we might know, and our body's saying you probably know. I wonder if it's just, you know, as soon as I am making an effort on some level that doesn't feel like a particularly exciting effort, as soon as I'm forcing, as soon as I'm, you know, as soon as the stakes seem higher, or just, you know, there's something about effort here, then it might not be the right task, activity, move, decision for me. I don't know. It just feels like everything else that we're talking about seems a lot effortless.
Yeah, you're so right. And something about like friction as well. Like, if I know, I certainly, if something doesn't feel aligned, and I've certainly got a lot better at listening to this and noticing it, that when something doesn't feel aligned, I can feel it physically. And it's like there's friction there somewhere. There's my body, even though I might not know it consciously, some part of me knows that that's not right, or that's not what I really want. So I wonder how, whether it's a case of spending more time getting to know our own signals, that like it will show up differently in everyone. Because I think we've ignored those signals for so long, haven't we? And then we just got used to it. We've got used to that pain, like we're saying.
That's lovely. It's like that conversation we had about your puppy. You know,
Just
you can hear the background.
Thank you, Nancy. You know, every single noise needs something else, means something else. Let's think and reflect about it. But then ourselves, we're just going, well, I must just be tired. I'll go to bed.
Or I'll just push on through until I've finished this task.
Yeah, because I've got it all under control. You know, and we need, you're right, B, we need to listen to that a lot more. Yeah,
we're getting this feedback all the time, and it's just like, you know, what appetite have we got to listen to it? I think in my experience, I've just learned to put more value on my analytical thinking brain, and it seemed to over time kind of overridden some of the more intuitive kind of feedback from my body. Like, for example, like I'm exhausted, but oh my God, I've got so much to do on the to-do list. And in that chaotic, reactive mode, I'm just listening to that more than actually it's more important to rest. I'll be able to do that better if I rest first, you know, that can kind of calls the shots because it feels so much more urgent. But back to the shoe analogy, like, because in case you haven't seen the first one, well, you know, we're getting this feedback, like if we put a pair of shoes on that don't fit, and we know they're not comfortable. So we understand that feedback, but I think there's all sorts that we're just maybe not listening or seeing the value of when we tune in. Like B's noticing, you know, actually we do get quite a visceral sense sometimes of whether things feel aligned or not.
And there's a range to our responses, right? So you can have the friction that B's talking about. So it's just that kind of, well, that something about this doesn't feel right, but I don't know what it is. I can't put my finger, I just sense it, right through to, you know, the two of us falling down the stairs on different occasions in the last 3 months. Like the universe and our bodies going, look, you need to rest now. We're just going to make you. So there's a whole range in there of stuff that we can start to pay attention to before it becomes extreme, before it becomes chronic pain, or, you know, whatever the symptom is.
But it's, you know, and this is, as we always say this, don't we? We're all learning this in real time as well. It's like before you two came on the call, B and I were chatting, and she asked how I was, and I said, oh, I felt tired. I don't know why I don't know why I'm tired today. And she said, but you've just had a day of clients, and so there I was, not even acknowledging that it was okay for me to feel tired. It's mad, isn't it?
It is mad.
But we don't. It was like, for goodness sake, you know, pull yourself together, which is craziness.
Is that pull yourself together?
No.
Get fed this stuff. We tell it our children. Come on, put yourself together.
Yeah,
it's really, really powerful.
Yeah, the absolute opposite of letting yourself go.
And this is where I think the hope is in this conversation, because I think about, you know, when I think about all the things we discuss, and then I think about how I parent, and you know, I think when we don't raise awareness of this stuff, I just see we innocently pass the baton in a relay race where we just continue to uphold a system that maybe no longer makes sense for the vast majority, or for some anyway. And if we just keep on innocently passing this baton, and everyone keeps racing, upholding these systems and narratives, then, you know, you know, the generations coming through will just start doing that too, because that's what everyone does, right? And I want to belong and fit in and be included.
Yeah, you're so right. And one of the other things I had noted down was, obviously we're talking about how we let ourselves go, but how are we letting other people go? Or how are we allowing other people to let themselves go?
Yeah.
And I think it's exactly that as well. I think we talk about how when we give ourselves permission to whatever it might be, whether it's kind of expressing our emotions, that we are kind of at the same time we're giving other people permission to do the same. It's kind of a role modeling effect. So I think, yeah, you're absolutely right. It's how are we doing this for ourselves, but also what impact can that have on other people, and actually, yeah, what the things that we might inadvertently be doing that are almost preventing or deterring other people from letting themselves go.
And I wonder, when we spot something or we notice it and we challenge it ourselves, maybe we need to be better at calling it out as well, rather than just assimilating it and carry on, because other people might not spot something has happened that's freeing for us, but we might not share. I don't know. That just popped into my head.
I'm so grateful for our WhatsApp group, because we do call each other out on it.
Yeah.
Don't we?
Yes.
When and it usually begins with the word sorry, doesn't it?
Sorry, not sorry.
Sorry, not sorry. Yeah.
You're still apologizing.
Exactly, but that's still an apology.
Yes.
Yeah, but it is about calling it out, isn't it? And seeing through. And that's why I'm so grateful for B as well, and I know for our relationships, that we can do that for each other. Call that out. Ask those questions. Hold up a mirror so that you can really see what's going on. And one of the things I love in the work with my clients is that building rapport quickly so that you can actually do the same for them, is to point that out to them as well, to liberate them. That's why I love that Marianne Williamson quote so much. When we let go of our own fears, we automatically liberate others. I mean, I'm paraphrasing, and it's that when we can model this stuff for those around us, for our community, for our children, our daughters in particular, our colleagues, because then people begin to see, oh, if they're doing it, then maybe I can do it.
Oh, there's so many places to play here as well. It's like, we're keep coming back to this idea of why on earth are we all so busy, and this idea of busy. And if somebody says to me, what have you got plans for the summer, or what you're doing this weekend, to just, on a much more regular basis, tell the truth, which is, I have no plans. I'm hoping to rest as much as possible, or I don't know yet.
Yeah.
Or I want to get to the summer and then see how I feel, and then make, it's, and I think they're just very small examples, but it's, again, just being comfortable in the unknown and the not knowing. And it's Kyle Ceecey said, fall in love with not knowing, fall in love with having no idea. And that's really exciting, because we live in a society, certainly, where, if you don't know, you're clearly not holding it all together. Enough.
And it's absolutely that. And it's also being comfortable in other people knowing that we don't know.
Oh, yeah.
Because otherwise it's just upholding this idea that by knowing everything, which obviously no one does, then that is a sign of strength and superiority and all that crap. But I love that it's like those kind of small practical things that we can do. And I was thinking about how we can bed this into decision making, like however big or small. And it's like putting it through a kind of screening process. I think we've talked about this on other issues as well. It's like, is the decision I'm making, is it me letting myself go, or is it me trying to hold myself together? I guess it's the kind of, does it feel cold or does it feel warm? Does it feel aligned or misaligned? I think it's kind of the same thing, but, and again, kind of going down to like the micro scale, like going to the supermarket, for example, and choosing what I want for dinner? Am I choosing the kind of the healthy option that society says I should be choosing, or am I choosing the thing that I really, really want to eat? Like there's a very clear divide, and so often we don't stop and pause to think and realize that we have that choice, because we're just on autopilot with so much of this stuff. So actually, like, yeah, going down to that micro level, I love that. Because then I think starting with the small, and then, I mean, you can go straight in with big stuff, but I think we maybe don't realize that we have as much choice as we actually do.
It's like that Sonia Renee Taylor, Name That System. You know, I listened to her talk, and am I making this decision because a system dictates that I should, or that that's what I've inherited, so I therefore act in this way? And so I like that check, which is, you know, am I doing this? Is this letting myself go, or is this upholding, you know, passing on the baton, or just some level of expectation or standard that somebody else has for me?
And she uses the words radical self-love, doesn't she? And I guess this is the same thing.
Yeah, totally.
Yes, the letting ourselves go is radical self-love.
Yeah.
Oof.
Nice. Yeah, I hadn't. Yeah.
That feels like a good place to pause, I think, doesn't it?
Yeah.
I love that we're just like, oh my God, yeah. we're all learning here.
Yeah, that's a thinker. We like to end on a thinker and then go, oh yeah, probably need to put some time in here.
We're all just going to look into the top right corner of our screens and ponder.
Yeah, it's a good time to go. We've lost it now.
Yeah. Thank you all for listening. We hope you've enjoyed part 2, and we will be sharing details of our next talk very soon.
Yeah, thanks everybody.
Bye.
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 Bye.